Hello there everyone, and welcome back to the mini album workshop. Today I'm going to talk to you about actually using your decorative papers on your card base pages. There is a PDF file for you to download and for you to make some notes, of which I have mine here. Now then, it says you have the size of the cardstock base pages. We now need to work out the size you're going to cut your decorative papers. Whatever the height and the width of your base pages are, then we will deduct 1/8 of an inch to allow us to have a very small border of the base pages showing around the outer edge of the decorative papers. You also need to choose which decorative papers to use and the order you will have them. Okay, now I'm going to show you the papers that I'm going to be using the Bloom Graphic 45 paper pads. I'm just going to pull my blind up a bit because the sun's just come out and the lighting's a little bit uneven. There we go. So these are the pages that I'm going to be using. So I've got two of this one. I've got two of this one. I have two of this one. I have one of this one. And then from a totally different paper pack to do with the patterns and solids, and I think it was Garden Goddess, I actually got these two pieces of paper out as well because I also like the plain greens that are on the back because they go nicely with the Bloom pack, as well as the patterned papers on the front, so that if I wanted to do something a little bit different and have these as my decorative papers, then I can do. Now in total we are going to need 13 pieces of card. 13 pieces of the decorative paper. So we're going to need one on the front, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We're not putting any on this back piece because this back piece will be attached to the cover. So you'll need a total of 13 pieces. Now I mentioned a minute ago about the actual size. Now this is very similar to the page that you got in the last PDF, which has this box on it which represents the page, like so. Alright, and you should have listed down your page width, the page height and the center point score. You'll notice that I've also added on here decorative paper height and decorative paper width. Right, so that's an extra measurement on there. Now then, we don't need to know the full width of the page because we're not cutting one piece to cover all of that. We're cutting one piece for this side and one piece for this side. So in that case, we need the center point score measurement to work out our decorative papers. Now, my page height, I'll just get my ruler, is 8 1/4 inches. So that's 8 1/4 inches. I hope you can see that okay. And I'm going to take 1/8 of an inch off that. So I'm going to go down one complete notch. So my paper height needs to be 8 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to make a note here of the decorative paper height is going to be 8 1/8 inch. The paper width, because we're going from the center point to the edge, from the center point to the edge, it's the center point measurement that we need. So mine measured 5 3/4 inches. So again, looking at my ruler, if I go to 5 3/4 inches and I go down one complete notch, I need my paper width. In fact, if I move it across, you might see it better on the cream. So I'm going to go from 5 3/4 inches down to 5 5/8 of an inch. All right, so 5 5/8 of an inch. Right, so I've got my measurements now of how I want to cut my papers. The next thing I need to decide then is also the order of the papers. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to cut all the pages out and then decide on the order that I want them. Alright, so I'll come back to that in a moment. So I'm just going to get my paper trimmer out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the height of the papers first. So if I get one of my pages, so I'm going to cut the height out first, alright, because then I will end up with one long strip at either the top or the bottom. Sorry, the sun keeps coming out and creating shadows, so I'm just going to pull this blind down completely and then we won't get any shadows at all. There we go. So I'm going to cut the height out first so that I can end up with one long strip. Alright, so I need to look at my decorative papers and decide which is the part that I actually want on my page. So I think that to have this gazebo, is it a gazebo? Anyway, the garden hut bit, I actually want that included. So I'm going to trim off this top piece here first with the name title on it. And then I'm going to spin it round because I want to cut the height of the page, and the height of the page that I want is 8 1/8. And slide that under. 8 1/8. And now I've got this full strip that I can save for something else a little bit further down the line. I'm now going to cut it to the width that I want, which is 5 5/8. So 5 5/8. So that's one piece cut. And then I want another piece that is 5 5/8. So again, I need to look at the paper and decide which part I want on it. So let's have a look at that bit first. 5 5/8. So it eliminates this bit here. Or do I want, if I spin it round, 5 5/8. I think that that's probably better in terms of the pattern that I'm getting. So I'm going to do it that way round. So I've now got my second piece. Right, so I've got two pieces cut out, ready to glue onto my book. What I'm going to do first, now I've cut those out, I just want to check that they look okay on the page, because I may decide to trim off just a fraction more, because what I want to happen is I want to have a very thin border. I don't know whether you'll be able to see that okay. Can you see I've got a very thin border of the dark green showing through beyond the edge of the decorative paper, and I'm happy with that fit. I'll just check it on the other side. Yep. So that is what it will look like when I've glued it onto my page. So I'm happy with that. So I know that I've got my measurements correct. So I'm going to cut this one next, and again I'm just going to trim off that border edge so that it doesn't distract me. And then because this is more of an overall pattern, I am going to cut it down. Move that ink pad out of the way. I'm going to cut the height first, and I want my height to be 8 1/8. So I haven't got much consideration to make at the moment with regards to the pattern, because they're quite all over patterns. So the width I want to be 5 5/8. And I'm going to spin it round again, so that I've got the best of the pattern on the page. So that's those two now cut out. Now if you have a page like this to cut out, there is a slightly different consideration to make. So I'm going to trim off this top edge again. And I'm going to cut to 8 1/8 high. Now I do need to look at this pattern and decide which part I want on my page, because if I cut it to here, then I'll have all of that on. If I cut it so that my 8 1/8 is down to here, then I'll be omitting all of this part here. So I really need to have a little bit of a think about what I actually want to include. So I think, let's get my ruler out and just have a look. And I'm just going to pick out 8 1/8 on my ruler, and I'm just going to lay it on top. You see, if I do it from the bottom and 8 1/8 inch up, I'm cutting through that bouquet of flowers. If I do it directly from the top, then my 8 1/8 inch comes halfway through those stamps, and I don't want to actually cut either of them half off. So my 8 1/8 inch, if I move my ruler down, my 8 1/8 finishes here and starts here. So therefore I've got the full bouquet in and the stamps. Now obviously if you're using different papers to me, you might need to look at each of the pages that you've decided to use and look at the same kind of considerations. So I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cut the width off first, which is 5 5/8. 5 5/8. And that just gets the width of the stamps in as well. So I'm happy with that. I just want to double check I've got that measurement right. 5 5/8, yeah. Okay. So I'm happy with that. Now I know that my 8 1/8 comes just fractionally below the stamps, so I'm going to trim that bottom bit off, not by measuring it, but just trim it off. And then I'm going to measure 8 1/8 from this bottom edge up to the top. So 8 1/8. And then I'm getting the best of my paper pattern on the actual page. So I'm happy with that. Now I need to look at the other side and give it the same kind of consideration. If I look at the width of it, which is 5 5/8, so from this edge 5 5/8 across is going to cut those stamps in half. And I don't necessarily want to do that. So if I go 5 5/8 from this edge, I can see that I'm going to cut this strip off here where there isn't actually an awful lot going on. So again, I think I'm quite happy to do that. So let's get the width sorted out first, which is 5 5/8. Now again, I need to look at it and think about how high I want the page and which part of the decoration I want in. If I start at the top and measure my 8 1/8 inch down, then I will include the stamps. So there's my 8 1/8 there. So I'll get to include the stamps, but then I'll have a funny triangle of a roof for there. So let's start from the bottom and measure 8 1/8 inch up. See, I get more of this decorative part here, and I get to include 2 of the stamps. So maybe that's the answer. Let's just have a look at it like that. So I get the saying in, I get this decorative flower bit in, I get 2 of the stamps in. So I think that that's the way I'm going to go, rather than, sorry, can you say that? Rather than doing it to there, where I've got the stamps, the saying, this saying, and part of a roof. The roof kind of looks as though it's just hanging in midair, whereas doing it that way, I get the garden bit, the roof's kind of explained, I get the verse in, I get 2 of the stamps in. So yeah, I'm going to do that, I think. So I need to measure from the bottom up to my 8 1/8 inch. So I can use this on something else, and I'm happy with that as a page in itself. So that will sit side by side like that, and I'm quite happy with how that works. So this is where you will need to look at your own papers and decide which parts of the pattern you want, and you end up, instead of getting a full strip, you'll end up with a lot of bits, but we can use those later on. But at least I'm happy with how those work. Now, as I say, if you're using different papers to me, then yours will take a different form of consideration. But yeah, I'm happy with those so far. So that's 6 pieces. Now this next one, I haven't got to think about this one at all because it's an overall pattern. But, and there's a little but here, what I'm thinking is on, was it that one? No, it was this one. On this page here, I've got this one that has a lift up page. So I'm kind of wondering if I should use this to decorate my 2 sides, and then this to be the bit that lifts up. I could flip it over and have plain green and then use that to lift it up. So that would lift up that way. Because I've also got the consideration on this page here, this flips open that way. So again, I could use one of these background pages and then have the decorative paper to flip back. Now then, do I prefer the lighter green or do I prefer the darker green? I think in this instance I prefer the lighter green. But this is where you will have to sit and play with your own papers and put that little bit of thought into it. So we know that we've got 2 pages where there's going to be a flip out on one and a flip up on the other. So you'll need to look at your own individual papers and decide what you're going to have as the decorative background bit and which paper you're going to have as the flip out. I'm kind of wondering now But if I'm going to do that, I'm wondering if this might be better as the flip out page. Have that as the background bit, this as the flip out page, and then have the other one as the flip up. I think that that might be the better bet, because I think that that might be too much of a contrast colour wise. That's very sort of dominant in its colour, it kind of hits you in the face, whereas that blends in a little bit better. So I think that I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my pages out of this one, and then I'll cut the other paper up for the flips. Okay, decision made, Carol, decision made. So again, I'm going to cut off that top strip, and then I'm going to cut it to 8 1/8 inch high, and then I'm going to cut the width of 5 5/8, and 5 5/8 for that piece. Okay, so that's for one of the flip pages. Now I'm going to do the same again with the dark green this time. I'm just going to look again. So if I have that as the decorative background page, I could have that as the flip up, or I could have that as the flip up, or I could use the plain paper and do it that way. And I'm thinking I quite like that. So I quite like the dark green together with the patterned, because this then doesn't jump out at me quite so much, because it blends a little bit better with the darker green. I just want to check that this green sits well with this green, which is the card. So it'll be like that. Or do I prefer that? I actually think I prefer the leaf pattern on it. Right, so I'm going to go with the leaf pattern, because I think it blends better with my card base page than if I use the plain. Yep, decision made. Ooh, I like it when we make a decision. Okay, let's trim off that edge again. 8 1/8. And 5 5/8, and again I need 2 pieces. So there's 1. There's 2. Okay, so how many pages have I got so far? So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So I've got 10 pieces, so I need another 3 pieces. So I'm going to do 2 pages in that. So that will give me 12 pieces. So 8 1/8. And then 5 5/8. So that's 12. Now then, the 13th one is the one that's going to sit on its own here. So I need to have a little think about which one I'm going to use, and I'm thinking that I like this one. So I'm going to cut out one piece out of this. So 8 1/8. And 5 5/8. And then that can sit on that front piece right there. Okay, I'm going to go and switch this off now. I'll let you print off the PDF, have a look through your papers, give it some consideration as to what papers you want to use where, and for you to work out your measurements and to cut those 13 pieces out. I'll be back shortly with another video of the next part of the process. See you in a little bit. Bye for now.